So, a huge, quite tragic milestone was passed this week, or celebration for some people. The last coal-powered power station was turned off. It produced its last bit of electricity in the UK on midnight Tuesday night, bringing to an end 142 years of electricity generation from coal. I mean, there's been some similar stories as well. There was also the same day the Port Talbot Steelworks closed its last remaining blast furnace, its coal-powered powered blast furnace. Recently, we also learned that Grangemouth, Scotland's last oil refinery, was to shut down. A refinery that represents or makes 80% of Scotland's fuel, 4% of its GDP.
Mhm.
Tom, this is the green revolution, so called, but it doesn't seem like something to be excited about, or something particularly progressive.
No, I mean what we're seeing is essentially the green deindustrialization of the United Kingdom, and yet it's being presented as a positive. I mean, reading the BBC write up of the closure of the Nottinghamshire coal-fired power station, they were hailing it as a great victory, that because so much progress had been made on renewables, that therefore they were able to close it a year early.
Mm,
Forget the jobs that are going to be lost as a consequence. Isn't this wonderful? And yet what's entirely skated over is the fact that not only is this an issue for jobs and certain areas which are reliant on those jobs and so forth, but also the fact that in tandem with this burst towards renewables, we have witnessed the skyrocketing of energy prices, the fact that we're now in the UK, in terms of industrial energy prices, paying more than any other country in the developed world. And we're also deindustrializing faster than almost any other country
yeah.
in the developed world. And those two things are obviously related. There's a refusal to really grasp what's going on here. And also, I think, rejection of the sort of inheritance of the Industrial Revolution, without being too grand about it. I mean, if you
Mm,
think about coal, and if you think about the blast furnace, these are fundamental to the great gift that this country gave the world, if we're going to be slightly jingoistic for a
yeah.
moment,
Mm.
in terms of what was unleashed there. And the fact that this is kind of being presented as a positive, I find very strange, because it's not to say that you're going to fetishize any one particular mode of industrial production or one particular mode of energy generation. But what's obvious to anyone who's been paying attention is that what is being presented to us as wonderful green alternatives are essentially not even a fraction of the sort of potential that was gained through fossil fuels. It's not to say that we shouldn't embrace, nuclear power or other
Yeah.
forms of energy, but
Mm.
the way in which effectively a kind of deindustrialization and a form of national decline is being presented as a positive, I find very dispiriting.
Yeah.
And the fact that no one really is willing to admit that that's what's going on here, I
Yeah.
suppose.
And it's worth pointing out that coal is still by far, the cheapest form of energy. That's why India and China are building coal power plants aplenty, and good for them. The only reason it seemed expensive in the UK was because of various carbon taxes and net zero policies. So it was made deliberately unviable. And then you have, various screens saying, aha, look, it's not even, it's polluting, and it's not even cheap. It doesn't do the job you want it to. But we know that this plant in Nottinghamshire was absolutely integral to keeping the lights on during the recent energy crisis. I mean, it was only on for a few hours at a time, but avoiding blackouts is pretty important job, and that's something that actually is going to be, we're putting ourselves at risk at. It's not just that we're deindustrializing, that these heavy industries are closing down. Even the most basic functions of powering people's homes is now at risk thanks to the green agenda, which is deeply, deeply worrying. Simon, what have you made of it? I mean, there's also a social history of coal, I guess, is the other,
I
is the other
listen. I
factor.
don't particularly care about the social history or the industrial revolution as an historical legacy that we should be proud of. We should absolutely prioritise the future, but it's extraordinarily worrying, the figures, as you say, that are emerging. And it's not only Britain, of course. Most of Europe is deindustrialising. Germany is at least as bad. And, for most of my adult life, of course, we regarded Germany as a competitor, but now it's becoming more and more obvious, whether or not we're in the EU or not, that China and the East and then America are our competitors, and we should all be trying to maintain some sort of, balance in Europe's ability to manufacture. Matt Ridley has been posting quite a few graphs and statistics lately, none of which I've memorized, of course, but demonstrating that the wattage, the kilobytes or whatever of power, of electrical power that are used in per person in America now an order of magnitude more than in Britain. You know, it's terrifying. We're turning into a developing nation. It's really scary how brazen, how utterly cavalier they are being with the industrial future of the country, as if we can all just move into service tech or, you know, I don't know what even things like biotech, you know, which are maybe not like filthy power station sort of aesthetically, you know, still require a certain amount of energy to keep the lights on. And we've become, I think, somehow hypnotized by an aesthetic rather than an actual plan. You know, people think electric vehicles are cleaner and quieter, and they can be lovely. You know, I've driven in a few. It's very nice to purr around, but the reality is the open cast mining is taking place out of the corner of your eye. You know, still know the planet. If it's the planet you're trying to save, the best policy for Britain, as Konstantin Kisin put it beautifully in his speech to the Oxford Union, the best policy for Britain would be to absolutely be world leaders that would suck in all the best available talent around the world that would come here and work on creating the new green technology that will eventually save us, but not to switch to it before we're ready, you know?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and even people who are advocates of net zero or whatever, the International Energy Agency have said, you know, the technology is not there. Our own Climate Change Commission says that, you know, 60% or more of, you know, greenhouse gas cuts will have to come from what they quite euphemistically call behavior change.
Yeah.
That means traveling less, doing less, you know, consuming less.
Literally dimming the lights.
And that's where everything gets turned on its head. Because, of course, the great inheritance, the great boon of the Industrial Revolution is not the coal or the smog or anything like that per se. It's the tremendous economic growth that was unleashed by this. It's the way in which living standards shot up, the way in which there's a kind of knock-on effect of that, literacy, all these great things which took place as a consequence of human ingenuity and human hard work. It's all of those lessons have kind of been forgotten.
Yeah.
Like the idea of energy being, as people used to say, too cheap to meter as a sort of goal has been completely gone now, because that would be seen as reckless. You almost make a virtue out of energy being expensive, because therefore you'll use less of it and so on. All of that is being lost now. You know, in a
if
really
we start with
way.
nuclear, that could have been a conceivable. I mean, that is almost what they have in France or have had. You know, electricity incredibly cheap, and as my father never tired of pointing out, you know, if you're worried about nuclear disasters, A, we get our energy from France, and B, there are closer nuclear reactors to London than Sizewell B or whatever it's, you know, Windscale or whatever it was called. So, you know, it's an absurd idea of the fear of it. But that, I guess, is gone now. I don't know. I was reading on the BBC's website about the history of the coal-fired power stations. And there, I don't know if it was the first one, but there was one that was in Holborn Viaduct, opened by Thomas Edison.
Yeah,
you know,
that was
the
very first one,
right in the heart of the centre of London.
Yeah.
You know, this is, as you say. I'm not saying I don't care about the history. I'm fascinated by it, but it's if it were obsolete, fine, get rid of it. You know, if it were on balance, even obviously a bad thing, but they just haven't made the case. They've lost the case. They've lost the argument, and they've gone, well, we're going to do it anyway. So, you know, suck it up.
Yeah.